programs in Europe. She looked at the Manil collection. She looked at DIA. She talked to the Rockefeller Foundation. She went out to Cap Street. That was pretty
In
much
San Francisco.
in San Francisco. But before you leave Art Pace, I want Riley, I'll start it, but the thing that was astonishing about the residency programs, it was Linda's commitment to do absolutely anything that these artists,
yes.
if we could do, I'll start, but Riley has the best story.
Riley has a great story, yeah.
But is the best, but I'll start. I can remember one day there was an artist from Ireland who called, Dorothy Cross, and she asked, Linda had an office in, which is now the office of the new director at Art Pace, Regine, but that was Linda's office, and she went to work every day. So she wasn't some society lady without a job. I mean, she was there every day, and so she took this call from Dorothy Cross from Ireland, and the artist said, Miss Pace, I'm coming. I just want to know, I'm from Ireland. We don't have any snakes in Ireland. And she said, are there any snakes in Texas? And Linda said, you betcha. And she said, how many do you want? And so that initiated this sort of snake hunt. And, there were times that these residency programs, I guess, there was one that was all women that was when Nancy Rubens, was it Nancy? No, Mona Hatoum, Teresita Fernandez, and that artist from Thailand, whose name...
Rashomir.
Yes. And this happened, they were there all together, these three women, and Linda was just watching these younger feminist artists work and help one another. The artist from Thailand didn't speak English very well, and Teresita Fernandez was always looking after her, and Mona Hatoum was there, and as it happened, Linda had suffered a terrible tragedy during that residency, and at that point, Mona Hatoum, I think, called Riley, as I recall, or somebody, I think she called you, Riley, and said, are we going to go on with this program? Mm-hmm. And Linda, in her grief, said, absolutely. There's never been a time in my life when I wanted to be at Art Pace more than now, because I need to nurture everyone's creativity, but certainly my own. So the amount of personal involvement, but there were hilarious stories. Riley, you tell some
Riley, tell us
stories.
that story you told us the other day about, you know which one, right?
About the fire?
About the fire?
There's so many stories.
About the fire?
Yeah.
An artist, a very good artist, a very good friend of mine. He splits his time between Dallas and Vietnam. His name is Jun Hatsu Shiba, and he just worked from sun up till sundown and then some on his project. He's very committed. It was very early, and we were trying to figure out how Art Pace was supposed to run and its structure. And he was putting a piece together in the Hudson showroom upstairs. It was made out of 50 or 60 bags of charcoal briquettes. And it was a very beautiful outline. If you had, suppose you had taken a boat hull and pressed it down into the charcoal briquettes so it left the outline of a boat hull. And he was talking to me about it, and it was really a beautiful piece. And he said, and then for the opening, we're going to light it. And, he wasn't kidding. He was really very serious about it. And there's been no censorship of artists there. There's been no hand that tells somebody, you need to make this work versus this work. That has never happened there. But in that case, we did say, due to the safety of the guests, you really can't light that on fire.
What did Linda say about that, though? You told us the other day about Linda's comment?
She said, short of burning down the building, he can do anything he wants. Short of burning down the building.
And that was generally her attitude, creative freedom. Yep.
There were so many others. Tell them a couple more.
We've cut holes in the building. We've built walls, piled garbage sky high, bought 8 tons of salt, and then another artist had to put 10 tons of wheat in one of the spaces, flown dice over cowboys in the hill country. There's so many stories, it's hard to kind of pick one out.
Well, let's move on to the sort of next milestone, which is the book Dreaming Red, which, by the way, is available in the SAMA store if you would like to pick up a copy. And Jan, I guess you'll tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, in about at the 5-year mark, after ArtPace had been in business open for 5 years, Linda decided that she wanted to write an early history of it. And so that's when we began Dreaming Red. And the book is in 2 parts. It's the who of ArtPace, which is Linda, the founder, and the what. And so there's a lot of beautiful images from early residency. Now it's early because we're all old, but it's early residencies, and it sort of tells the story of ArtPace, and it has a beautiful, some beautiful description by curators. And I think that I'm glad that Linda made that decision because we have a lot of information from her. But again, it was bold. I think she wanted to tell her story as honestly as she could, and she wanted to tell ArtPace's story and to make sure that they were joined. So that was that. You know, I also, just going back to some of the residencies, is that there were milestones for her that had ramifications later. She did form these beautiful friendships with a few. She liked all of the artists and did it, but some of them were lifelong friendships, and such as Jessie, who's I think here tonight, and Teresita Fernandez, and Isaac Julian. When Isaac Julian came in '97, Linda was just transformed by him, and she thought he was the most interesting artist that she had ever talked to, and made a decision that to buy everything that she could of Isaac Julian's, which was a very interesting moment in the way she decided to form her collection, which I know we'll get to later.
Well, that's actually the next topic, so it's a good segue.
So she decided that there were certain artists that she was going to be with, and that they were going to help her in the cornerstone of her collection. So it's such an interesting relationship between Linda as artist and then Linda as founder of ArtPace and friend to these artists, and then Linda, she's complicated. Is the thing.
So basically about the same time that Dreaming Red was underway was when Linda started to really expand her collecting.
Right.
And Guillermo, do you want to, because I know that had a big impact on
Yes.
you, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of going back to the end of my story about the artist dinner at my house and Linda's wanting to kind of get me to loosen up, I think that that one of the things that I will always hold very dear to me is that she was a great mentor, and she really caused me to stop and think and to open my mind and open my eyes to, which, and today it sounds silly to say, but like to video and to photography. And because, now, it's something that people collect more commonly, and it is, they're wonderful forms of art. But in the mid-'90s and the late '90s, again, we were still very provincial, and even though we all travel a lot, we'd seen a lot of things in wonderful museums and collections, it's kind of, it's one thing when it's somebody else's stuff, and it's another thing when you're contemplating that kind of work for yourself and for your collection. So I think one of the things that she really did was to help me see things differently, and Part of that was through the dinners with the artists, not only the intimate ones where we were just 8 or 10 or 12 people literally having these wonderful conversations with the artist, but also the bigger dinners, the shows at Art Pace, and then we did some traveling with Art Pace. Art Pace, that was another facet of Art Pace, were these wonderful trips where you would go and be exposed to these big art fairs, whether it was in England or in New York or Venice or Tokyo, or I can't remember all the different ones, but there were quite a few. And so by listening to a lot of what Linda said, a lot of the curators that would come down, it would kind of help explain and understand what a lot of this work was. And once you talk to the artist, or once you talk to a curator that really understands what the work is about, it's like turning the lights on, for me at least. It's very it's wonderful, it's emotional, it's enlightening, and then you have an aha moment. You go, wow. And so, I could kind of go on. I mean, one time Linda and I and Catherine Canjo were, and I'm not sure if Rick was there, but we were at Art Basel in Miami, and I'd wanted to buy a Leonardo Drew, but there were two of them. One was at Basel, and one was, I think, at Nada at another show, and I really kind of had never asked anybody for advice on artwork to purchase, but it was a big investment at the time, and I didn't really understand the work as well as I might today. And so, it was just kind of a wonderful moment where Linda never said a lot, and she thought a lot about things, and that also kind of unnerved me because obviously I talk a lot, and so I never knew what she was thinking. But what I learned afterward, maybe that evening or it was the next day, was that all she was thinking about was which of the two pieces was the right one for me to buy and which one I should add to my collection. And so she was incredibly thoughtful and generous in that way. And I got back to the hotel after we were all worn out, and the phone rang about a half an hour later, and it was Linda. And she told me which one she thought I should buy. Mm-hmm. And it really was kind of a wonderful bonding moment. Sure. Yeah.
I'd like to just say something as it relates to this collection and Guillermo's beautiful story. Linda was very smart about the ramifications of what she did in every aspect of her life as an artist and as a founder of Art Pace and a collector. And when she opened Art Pace and founded it, one of her dreams would be that if we brought these artists to San Antonio and the curators, that it would create a hunger, a desire for other people to own contemporary art, that there would be an economy based upon it so that local artists would be able to earn a living, and we would have local collectors such as Travis, who's here, and Guillermo's who's here, and all the people represented in this show. And I think one of the many birthday presents that I feel about Linda today is that this has definitely been realized, that we do have a strong and growing contemporary art economic model happening here. And that was a dream that Linda had. There are many people in this room especially on her birthday, that are affected by Linda's ideas every day of their life, which is saying a lot, because her ideas were big, even though she didn't talk all the time, as Guillermo said. They were carefully thought out, and having a local economy based on contemporary art was part of her plan.
Okay, we're going to sort of move forward. Riley, do you have anything to add about Linda as a collector?
I just as an artist, I know that she really supported the local economy, and it's just fantastic to actually. I have a piece in her collection, and I was really taken. I didn't know she was going to purchase it, and I was. It just makes you feel really good as an artist that you can do it here in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm. So moving forward in time to the year 2001 now, there was another milestone in Linda's life that took place right here at SAMA, known as the RED Project. Who would like to begin that discussion?
I think James.
Jan would? Okay.
This was a beautiful moment for Linda, and it
there it
represented
is.
a kind of a conflict in her life, but it's kind of one that I'll discuss. George Newbert was director of SAMA, and he one day came to Linda's studio in Terrell Hills and was looking at some of her work, and she was doing these assemblage pieces, and there was a pink one that George wanted to buy for his daughter. And Linda said, okay, great. And then she said, well, let me show you this other thing I've been working on. And Linda showed George the red piece. And the red piece came directly out of Linda's dreams. Beginning in 1997, Linda began dreaming constantly of red. She saw red in her dreams everywhere. And as an assignment for our dream group, she did one 2x2 square of images of red things that she had collected, and she brought them to the dream group and described how that these were representing things that were repressed in Linda's life, or ways that she felt objectified, or emotions that she had. And we were all this is a small group, but we were really taken by it. Well, Linda did that one little square that night, but then to do the red piece, she did 16 of them. And word got out that Linda was collecting red things, and people started giving them to her. And some of the things were funny, like she had a party, and this man gave her a red bra, and she said, well, I think I can use that. I mean, it was just strange that people kept giving it to her. But the night that it opened in the Great Hall, when George asked her to do it, she at first thought, well, maybe it's a conflict of interest, because she was a supporter of the museum, and she was afraid people in town would gossip and say that she got this show because she was a supporter of the museum. But then she decided, what the heck, I'm just going to go for it and show my art and see what happens. And that night there were about 400 people, right, Riley, and in the Great Hall, and they were people, a lot of local artists were there, a lot of her childhood friends were there, all of her family was there. And I think it was a moment in Linda's life when she felt recognized as an artist by her hometown, and it was a really beautiful moment, and so thanks to SAMA for that one.
And actually 2 works by Linda Pace are in the San Antonio Collects Contemporary exhibition,
Yeah.
and one of them is a dream drawing that
Right.
features red,
Right.
appropriately.
The red curtain.
The red, Courtney's curtain.
Courtney's curtain.
Yes. Do either of you have anything to add about that night? Were you here, Riley?
It was just fun to see Linda so happy about her piece.
Mhm.
She was really accepted as a visual artist.
It's a tough, I just want to comment on something Jan said. I mean, this is a tough town to begin with, and then to be considered a society gal, and then, going and doing Art Pace, and then being an artist the whole time. I couldn't imagine the pressure of that night, because, and it was really brave of her to do it, but the pressure of wondering, having all these people from all those different backgrounds coming and kind of, judging you, and also, do they take you seriously? Do they not? Do they think you're playing artist? And so I just think what a brave thing to do, because I don't know if I would have done it if I were an artist.
I think it was a moment of emancipation for Linda, because she didn't care what anybody thought. She was just proud of her work, and and so she had arrived at a place in her life where she did have a voice, and she knew that she would be criticized, and she didn't care.
She had a lot of people questioning why she was even making art paste in the first place.
Right.
That was really difficult.
Yeah, it was there were a lot of naysayers and a lot of negativity, from, people that, didn't understand and didn't want to move forward and didn't want the
Well-
city to progress in a certain way. And I know that's kind of a negative thing to say.
Well, I guess sometimes it's hard to be a visionary, and
Yeah, very
until
much
people
so.
see the vision, they don't
Yeah.
always get what the vision is.
Right.
Yeah. Well, about the same time as the Red Project, Linda decided to move to a new neighborhood. And Jan, do you want to kind of kick that conversation off?
Well, Teresita, when Teresita was here, she began to talk about, and a lot of artists in New York that came from New York told Linda this, that they got so much done in San Antonio and that they would like to have a place to live in San Antonio or take an apartment in San Antonio. And Linda had this, when she began to think about that, could she create a place where maybe artists didn't come, but maybe some artists would come and live, collectors might come, people interested in contemporary art might choose to live. And so she found which was the Tobin building on South Flores. It's 83,000 square feet, and decided that she would develop that and move out of the north side and move south of Art Pace, a little less than 2 miles down South Flores from Art Pace, and connect somehow herself to Art Pace and to Camp Street, which is what she built.
And did she, what did she call the neighborhood?
Well, at I think this is true. At least she thought this was true. I haven't fact-checked it, but she did begin, at that time there were beginning to be other artists living down there on South Flores, and there were a few galleries there, and she had envisioned there would be a lot more than there are today, and she did call it SoFlo, not Soho, but SoFlo, South Flores, and that, I believe she was the originator of that phrase, and it certainly is coming to pass, not as quickly as Linda had hoped, but it is coming to pass.
Riley, don't you live somewhere thereabout in that region?
She already does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've lived in that neighborhood for a long time, but
And from an artist
The-
perspective, I mean, how is it beneficial to an artist to live in that neighborhood?
there's people of other like mind who live really close by, and it's easy to stay in touch with people.
She
It's-
bought it in
it's a good
2000.
sense of community.
It's a great community.
She bought it in 2001. I'd lost the date in my mind, but that's only 6 years ago. I mean, how no? That's a long time.
6 years?
11
No,
No,
11
2001,
years.
11 years. 11 years. Time is flying by. Guillermo,
Sorry,
did you
I
have
wasn't good at math.
I just, well, the first time she invited me over, I remember the big issue were the steps that were holding up the building. They were a little higher than what the city was going to allow, so it was kind of a pebble in her shoe for a while. But because she was kind of, a major pioneer in that area, although there always were a lot of people in that neighborhood. But as far as trying to envision a campus and envision Camp Street, and of course I hate this to sound like a shameless plug, but in following Linda, we're building 63 apartment and live workspaces right across the street from Chris Park
Yay.
to welcome galleries, businesses, and residents to further, expand that area.
So continuing Linda's dream.
Yes.
Yes. In 2002, then, the next year, she made an important decision affecting Art Pace. Jan, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. As time went on, Linda's interest grew and grew. during Catherine Cancho's tenure as director, Linda grew her collection by leaps and bounds. She started spending much more of her effort on building her collection, with Catherine kind of helping her with that. And she began to see that she wanted to do other things, always more, and that art piece was becoming mature. And the way she put it is that it needed to be more than about one